Michael would like to take time to remember some special family members who are no longer with us. William Scaldwell and Reginald Daltrey, Michael's grandfathers. Joanne Helen, Michael's grandmother. Betty Sullivan, Kaitlin's grandmother. And Charles Sullivan, Kaitlin's grandfather. Will you please join me in honoring their memory with a moment of silence? Thank you. Now, I would like to invite Kaitlin's aunt and godmother, Jan McKay, to come forward for our first reading.
The first reading is entitled "The Color of My Love" by David Foster. I'll paint a sun to warm your hearts, knowing that we'll never part. I'll draw the years all passing by, so much to learn, so much to try. I'll paint my mood in shadow blue, paint my soul to be with you. I'll sketch your lips in shaded tones, draw your mouth to be my own. I'll trace a hand to wipe your tears and trace a look to calm your fears. A silhouette of dark and light to hold each other oh so tight. I'll paint the stars in the evening sky, draw the light into your eyes. A touch of love, a touch of grace, to softly fall on your moonlit face. And with this ring our lives will start, let nothing keep our love apart. I'll take your hand to hold in mine and be together through all time.
Thank you, Janet. Whenever I am blessed with the opportunity to officiate a wedding, I like to tell a little bit of the bride and groom's story. So, here are a few things you may or may not know about Mike and Kaitlin. First, Mike grew up in the small Canadian town of Thorndale. He has an older brother, Sean, and a younger sister, Jessica. His proud parents are Kevin and Louise, sitting here in the front row. Mike has been a minor league hockey official, and he's currently here in the States getting assimilated to life. He'd like to pursue a career in law enforcement. Kaitlin, on the other hand, grew up in Woodridge, Illinois. She has an older brother, Ryan, and an older sister, Kristen. And her awesome parents are my friends, Chuck and Mary Sullivan. She's currently a speech and language pathologist for the Itasca School District. Now, the relationship between Kaitlin and Mike began in January of 2014. Mike was officiating a Central Hockey League game in the Quad Cities where Kaitlin was going to graduate school at St. Ambrose University. One night, after a game, one of Mike's co-workers was looking at an online dating app when he comes across one of Kaitlin's friends. Mike's co-worker and Kaitlin's friend agreed to meet. Mike and Kaitlin went along. After several attempts, Mike and his friend and Kaitlin and her friend found a common place to meet. Kaitlin and Mike, even though they weren't the ones primarily responsible for initiating the meeting, started talking and found that they shared many interests. Among those was jet skiing. What won Kaitlin over was Mike telling her he'd love to take her out sometime on his jet ski. But it took a year and a half before it finally happened. Now, that night, Mike was able to get Kaitlin's phone number, and despite Mike being critiqued on his speech and having every word analyzed by Kaitlin's love for speech and language pathology, they decided to meet again. So from that night on, Mike and Kaitlin met each time he was in the Quad Cities to work CHL games. So soon after, one of those times Mike was back in the Quad Cities, he was talking with the guys about places he could take Kaitlin on a date. As Mike talked to his friends, Mike decided he would take Kaitlin to a fancy restaurant. He thought it was a great idea until one of his fellow officials asked, "What, are you going to marry her or something?" Mike panicked and changed his mind, settling for taking Kaitlin to a TGI Fridays instead. Now, the first thing Kaitlin did that sealed the deal for Mike involved her spending a large portion of her spring break flying down to visit Mike and travel with him as he worked hockey games all over the CHL. Kaitlin traveled from St. Louis to Kansas City to Wichita and back. By doing so, though, she got an in-depth look at what Mike's life as a hockey official was like. Knowing what she was up against, Kaitlin decided that she was all in. Now, one night, Mike was on his way to Brampton for an East Coast Hockey League game, and he was with his father, Kevin, when he decided to inform his dad that he was going to marry Kaitlin. Kevin was shocked and impressed. Mike asked him what his thoughts were, thinking that he was going to get a stern talking to and possibly encouragement to rethink his decision. To Mike's surprise, though, his dad was excited and happy. Kevin told Mike that if that was what he wanted to do, he had his full support to do so. Well, I think we're okay? We're good?
Yeah, we're good.
The next step for Mike was to ask Kaitlin's father, Chuck, for his permission to marry his daughter. So one night, when Mike was spending some time with Kaitlin at her home in Woodridge, Mike went out with Chuck to pick up dinner with the idea in mind to ask Chuck for Kaitlin's hand in marriage. Well, Mike was nervous. They went out and picked up the food, and all Mike could think about was how to control his nerves in order to ask Chuck the big question. The drive almost came and went when Mike finally built up the courage and asked Chuck if he could marry his daughter. Chuck looked at Mike. Mike thought to himself, "Oh dear, here we go." Chuck answered with two questions. "Are you sure you want to do that?" "And do you know what you're getting yourself into?" Of course, Chuck finally said yes, or we wouldn't be here today. Now, Mike and Kaitlin's proposal has a funny story to it, too. On a nice, bright June day, Mike was visiting Kaitlin in Chicago. They decided to go downtown and do some shopping and sightseeing. Mike's plan was to propose to Kaitlin at the end of Navy Pier. On the way to the pier, Kaitlin was making Mike nervous by asking a lot of questions, and at one point, even attempting to pat Mike down like a criminal as she was guessing that Mike had the ring on his person. She came within inches of the box, but still claims that she never felt it. Mike's method of proposing to Kaitlin was to write a love letter, and at the end of the letter, have the question by itself on the reverse side. When they got to Navy Pier, the end of the pier was under construction, so they were only able to go so far. They sat down to enjoy the weather and watch the boats come in as it was getting dark. Mike handed Kaitlin the note, and she began to read it silently. At several points, Mike asked Kaitlin to read out loud so he could find out where she was, so he'd be able to go down on one knee at the right time. As she got to the question, Mike slowly began to reach for the ring in his pocket when Kaitlin looked up. She asked what he was doing and was quickly redirected by Mike to keep on reading. She got to the question, and before Mike was able to get the ring out and get on one knee, Kaitlin stole the box and put the ring on. She was beyond happy, though Mike doesn't ever really recall her officially saying yes at the time. So, Kaitlin, can we assume that because you're standing here today, it means that you meant to say yes?
Yes.
A unique story for an awesome couple. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce Mike's uncle, Matt Daltrey, who will come up and give us our second reading.
the reading entitled Marriage Joined